da adesso.
US-Russia nuclear treaty expires, raising serious concerns. The United Nations calls for urgent action to prevent an arms race. The United States' push for inclusion of China in a nuclear deal. Here is what the expiration of the New START treaty means.
Hello, I am Ellie Richardson and you are watching another episode of Explained with me. Today we discuss the New START treaty. The last nuclear weapons control treaty between the US and Russia has expired, raising fears of new arms race. The Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, known as New START, and signed in 2010, was one of a handful of agreements designed to help prevent a catastrophic nuclear war. Its expiry on February the 5th, 2026 at midnight GMT effectively marked an end to the arms control cooperation between Washington and Moscow that helped bring an end to the war. The expiration of the treaty has received global reactions. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that any nuclear deal with Russia needs to include China as well. Rubio's remarks came hours before the treaty was set to expire. Let's listen in.
You know, the president's been clear in the past that in order to have true arms control in the 21st century, it's impossible to do something that doesn't include China because of their vast and rapidly growing stockpile.
Russia has struck a cautious tone following the expiration of the New START treaty, with Dmitry Medvedev, the former president who signed the agreement in 2010, warning that its end should alarm everyone. A senior advisor to President Putin also remarked that Russia would act in a measured and responsible manner if the treaty expired, stressing that the country would remain calm but prepared. Later in the day, the Russian Foreign Ministry has released a statement indicating that given the current circumstances, both parties are no longer bound by the treaty's obligations or core provisions. The ministry made it clear that Russia is free to choose its next steps, but it also reassured the international community that it would act responsibly and in a balanced manner. However, the ministry also noted that Russia is prepared to take decisive military technical measures to counter any new threats to its national security. China has expressed regret over the expiration of the US-Russia New START treaty, calling it a significant development with serious implications for global strategic stability. The Chinese Foreign Ministry urged the United States to resume dialogue with Russia on strategic stability, emphasizing the need for constructive engagement to avoid a negative impact on the international nuclear arms control system. Let's listen in.
维护开放、包容、普惠的国际贸易环境，符合各国的共同利益。各方都有责任为维护关键矿产的全球产供链稳定与安全发挥建设性作用。同时，我们反对任何国家以小圈子的规则破坏国际经贸秩序。
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has warned that the end of the current arms control framework marks a grave moment for the international peace and security. He called on both Russia and the US to negotiate a successor agreement without delay. Guterres stressed that without a new framework, the world will face a situation where there are no binding limits on strategic nuclear arsenals. He added that the countries with the majority of the world's nuclear weapons would be free to expand them without restrictions. Guterres urged the US and Russia to reset their relations and create an arms control regime that can keep pace with the rapidly evolving global landscape. He said the risk of nuclear conflict is higher now than it has been in decades. While he acknowledged the willingness of both US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin to prevent unchecked nuclear proliferations, Guterres called on them to move beyond words and take action. Earlier, Pope Leo also warned of a new arms race. He urged that two states to renew the treaty, saying the current world situation required calls for doing everything possible to avert a new arms race. Let's listen in.
Domani giunge a scadenza il trattato New Start, sottoscritto nel 2010 dai Presidenti degli Stati Uniti e della Federazione Russa, che ha rappresentato un passo significativo nel contenere la proliferazione delle armi nucleari, nel rinnovare l'incoraggiamento a ogni sforzo costruttivo in favore del disarmo e della fiducia reciproca. Rivolgo un pressante invito a non lasciare cadere questo strumento senza cercare di garantirgli un seguito concreto e efficace. La situazione attuale esige di fare tutto il possibile per scongiurare una nuova corsa agli armamenti che minaccia ulteriormente la pace tra le nazioni.
But what is the New START Treaty? The New START Treaty was signed in 2010 and entered into force on February the 5th, 2011. The treaty was designed to enhance US national security and global stability by placing verifiable limits on both Russia's and the US strategic nuclear weapons. Under the treaty, both countries agreed to limit their deployed strategic offensive arms, including intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and heavy bombers that could carry nuclear arms. One of the key aspects of the New START Treaty was its aggregate limits, which was set to be met by February the 5th, 2018. These limits included a maximum of 700 deployed ICBMs, SLBMs, and heavy bombers equipped for nuclear armaments. The treaty also capped limits on the number of nuclear warheads, with both countries agreeing to no more than 1,550 nuclear warheads on deployed strategic weapons, such as ICBMs and SLBMs and bombers. In addition, a limit of 800 deployed and non-deployed launchers and heavy bombers was also in place. Each heavy bomber counted as one warhead towards the limit, even if it was capable of carrying multiple warheads. The New START Treaty was a crucial element in ensuring that the US and Russia, who possess the largest nuclear arsenals in the world, could manage their nuclear weapons in a transparent way. The treaty established a structure for regular data exchange, inspections and notifications to verify compliance. The agreement helped provide a measure of stability in nuclear arms control following the Cold War. The treaty was set to expire on the February the 5th, 2026. But why did it expire? Under the terms of the new treaty, New START could only be extended once, meaning was set to expire on February the 5th of this year. Back in September 2025, Russia suggested both countries could agree to keep the treaty's limits for another year, as US President Donald Trump showed initial support for this, but also said he was interested in negotiating a new deal, one that could have included China. Despite this, he seemed unconcerned about the treaty ending. New START has been under pressure for a while now. While both US and Russia have kept to the treaty limits, verification measures haven't been fully implemented. Inspections stopped in 2020 because of COVID. Then in 2023, tensions over Ukraine led Russia to suspend compliance, refusing inspections and data exchange. In response, the US decided to withhold some of the required information. But what does this mean? While Russian and US nuclear arsenals under New START treaty already posed an unacceptable threat to humanity, without the treaty, the risk of nuclear use will only increase. This is due to the possibility of a nuclear arms race escalating. It's in no country's interest to expand global nuclear arsenals. Instead, all nuclear-armed states should commit to completing existing international agreements on nuclear disarmament. Even though New START may have expired, the legal obligation remains for Russia, the United States and other nuclear weapon states to negotiate disarmament and an end to the arms race. This obligation comes from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which was adopted in 1968 and extended indefinitely in 1995. The next review conference of this treaty will be held this April to May in New York, where nuclear weapon states must report on the progress made in the last 5 years and their plans for the next 5 years. At times of high tension among nations, disarmament measures become even more crucial. That's all we have time for this episode of Explained. Stay tuned as we bring you more in-depth insights and stories that matter.